Beth, are you making, are you letting Jen share her screen, or how does that work?
Not yet. Oh, I am the co-host now, so maybe, okay, now I should be able to share my screen if I can find the right one. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about STAR voting. And first, to tell you about this acronym, this stands for Score Then Automatic Runoff. And I know I kind of feel like this presentation is out of order coming before the other two methods because it's the newest and probably the least familiar. So let me just comment briefly. I hope that folks have at least a little bit of familiarity with the other two methods. IRV is a method where voters rank their candidates in order. Approval voting is a method where voters approve any number of candidates. They can say yes or no. And these methods belong to two different broad categories of methods. When you rank your choices, that's called an ordinal method because you're putting them in order. And when you just give each candidate an independent rating, like 0 or 1, in the case of approval voting, that's called a cardinal method, where you're assigning a value to each candidate. And STAR is kind of interesting because it's a combination of both things. So there are two steps. In the first step, voters give each candidate a score. So qualitatively, this is very much like approval voting. The big difference is that usually there's a wider range of scores besides just 0 and 1. Typically, you can rate each candidate on a score like 0 to 5. So think about like when you're rating products on Amazon and you give every product some number of stars. So you can give every candidate a rating from 0 to 5 stars. And that's how you cast your ballot. The ballots are tallied in a two-step process. In the first step, which is the score step, all the scores given to all the candidates by voters are tallied up, and the top 2 scoring candidates are identified. In the second step, which is the automatic runoff step, you now take the 2 top candidates, you look at every ballot again, and every ballot which ranked one of those 2 candidates higher than the other counts as a vote for the higher ranked candidate in the runoff. And then in that step, it's a typical runoff, except you don't need a new election. You just use the ballots that are already cast. So here's an example of what a STAR voting ballot looks like. So you might see a list of candidates. We've got Andrew, Bianca, Chris, Desi, Edith, and Frank. 5 stars indicates your full support. 0 stars indicates no support. And you just rank every candidate according to how much you support that candidate. Ties are allowed. You can see that this particular voter gave both Andrew and Desi a 4. So this voter feels like Bianca is their favorite candidate. Andrew and Desi are sort of their next favorite candidates and are tied. Edith, they don't like very much, but they want to give Edith 1 star. And they've left the rows for Chris and Frank completely blank, which is equivalent to giving those candidates 0 stars. So that's how this particular voter voted. In round 1, all the scores from all the ballots were tallied up. And we're going to say that in those, the top 2 scoring candidates were Andrew and Edith. So they are now the only 2 candidates left. And then in the runoff step, we come back and look at this voter's ballot. This voter gave Andrew a 4 and Edith a 1. That means that in the runoff, this ballot counts as 1 vote for Andrew. And then after that second round, Andrew is preferred by a majority of the votes that ranked either Andrew or Edith higher than the other, and Andrew wins. So that's how STAR works. Does that make sense? Are there any questions before I go on and talk a little more about this method?
So Edith got 1 vote. How many votes did Andrew get?
So this voter gave Edith 1 star, and this voter gave Andrew 4 stars. Over here, this says that Andrew got, in the runoff step, Andrew got 53% and Edith got 47%. And all we can see from this one ballot is that this voter's ballot counted for Andrew in the runoff step. Did that
What
answer
would-
your question?
How did that translate? It's a little confusing,
Sorry, how did what translate?
like the Andrew to Edith thing. So I see Edith got 1 star, Andrew got 4.
Right. So in the score step, all of the numbers of stars are added up. So in round one,
Um,
this voter gets to count Andrew for 4 points and Edith for 1 point. So the scores are used to identify the top 2 scoring candidates. Then in the second round, all that matters is that this voter ranked Andrew higher than Edith. It doesn't matter that it was a 4 or a 1, because this step is a traditional runoff step. Just which of these 2 do you prefer?
Jen, it is a little bit confusing because it looks like there were 79,000 plus ballots if Andrew got 42,533 votes in the runoff. But I don't think that if you add up all those scores, you even get 79,000. So I wonder if there's a mistake with this example, but
That could be. I
Yeah,
got
there's
this
no
graphic.
mistake. It's the scores that you get aren't necessarily the number of ballots that were given, because a score can be 5, 0 to 5.
sure, right, good point.
Right. Although I actually think Celeste is right, because typically you would expect the total number of stars to be more than the total number of votes, because at the second step, each voter only gets to give Andrew 1 vote. They don't get to give them 5 stars. So I actually agree that these numbers can't be right, and I apologize for that. I got this graphic from somewhere else and did not check the numbers adequately.
So what would happen if they ranked Andrew and Edith the same, like they both got a 4?
So first of all, the word you accidentally said rank, Jen, but you
Oh.
meant score. So we don't rank in this.
Sorry.
Right. So it counts like a tie vote. So that vote does not count. Well, the results of the runoff are reported as this many votes for Andrew, this many votes for Edith, this many ballots that were not counted for the runoff. So if the 2 candidates who advanced to the runoff, you gave them the same score, then you don't get a vote in the runoff. Any other questions about the mechanics of this?
I have a question. If you didn't score either Andrew or Edith on your ballot originally, then your vote would not count for the runoff stage.
Right, because you have given, if you don't score them, that's the same as giving them both 0 stars, which means you considered them tied. So for instance, if the final 2 candidates here had been Edith and Chris, then this voter would have counted as a vote for Edith, because they gave Edith 1 star and Chris 0 stars.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, good job.
So we're figuring 10 minutes plus Q&A, and you've got 3 minutes left of your presentation, but you've also done some Q&A. So
Okay,
just a
well,
time check.
well, I figured most of the time was going to be spent on these first 2 slides, so I'm actually good with that. I don't have a whole lot left. Some of this is just a little bit of the history. So first of all, this is a very new voting method. This was only invented 8 years ago. So it doesn't have that much of a track record yet. And the reason for introducing, so one could just do a score voting system, just have the score step, just give the top scoring candidate, declare them the winner. And that's essentially what approval voting is. Approval voting is a score system where you give every candidate a score of 0 or 1, and the candidate with the highest score wins. This is just sort of making that system a little more expressive and allowing you to score every candidate on a range of 0 to 5 instead of just 0 or 1. So that would be a score voting system. And then the addition of the runoff step was introduced in order to reduce strategic incentives such as bullet voting. You're incentivized to indicate your preferences between pairs of candidates as much as possible so that you get a say in the runoff. There's this guy, Jameson Quinn, who's a statistician, has worked with the Center for Election Science, and he's run some simulations comparing a lot of different voting methods. And he's got this metric called the voter satisfaction efficiency. He's run this with assumptions of different voter behavior, assuming that voters vote honestly, assuming that voters vote completely strategically, and various mixes of this. And I don't know if you can see this graphic that was produced, but this was a comparison of star and approval and ranked choice, and how satisfied voters were with their experience of voting and the outcomes. And you see a range. The different colors of dots refer to different voter strategies. But the conclusion was that basically for the variety of strategies, star voting tends to produce the most satisfied voters. Now, this is a simulation. There's not a lot of on the ground track record with that. So absolutely take that with a grain of salt. As far as adoption, Oregon is the state.
Jen?
Where, yes.
Jody had her hand up.
Oh,
Do
I'm
you
sorry.
still
Go
have
ahead,
a question,
Jody.
Jody?
Well, it's okay, but just did I catch that right? That you said if you only do that first round, just the assigning scores to people, that is score voting?
Yes.
Period. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yes. So that's why the acronym is SCORE, then automatic runoff. The first step is score voting, and then the second step is this automatic runoff. So in 2019, not that long ago, the Democratic Party of Multnomah County, and I'm not at all sure that I'm saying that correctly, adopted star voting for all their internal elections. And Celeste, is it going to be a place to post slides? Because I have several web addresses in these slides that I'd be happy to share.
So one thing you can do is put them in the chat right now. And yes, I think we should have these slides available.
Okay, after I'm done with my well, we have the chat disabled, but after I'm done with my presentation, if we re-enable chat, I can put these web links.
My
in.
guess is your chat is enabled because you're a co-host, but I could be wrong.
Well, I'm not going to try to do that while I talk.
Good.
There have been a few ballot measures to try to introduce star voting. Lane County, Oregon had a ballot measure that in November 18 that almost passed, but not quite, although the returns in the city of Eugene were strongly in favor of it. Supporters of this were going to try again in 2020, but COVID got in the way. So this is still on the to-do list in Oregon. And the Equal Vote Coalition is spearheading a statewide star voting initiative for Oregon that they're hoping to get on the ballot in 2024. So here are sort of the highlights of what that act would do. It would make star voting the default voting method for Oregon. It does allow for local jurisdictions to try other things if they want to. It's not a must do. It's just this is the default. To use star voting for partisan primary and general elections. And just in nonpartisan elections, such as city councils and things, you could eliminate the primary entirely, because basically you get, you can have one election that does it all, although jurisdictions could still opt to have a primary if they want. And the idea here is just to have Oregon be a test case. We need some on the ground experience with this method, just like all the other methods, to see how they work in practice and to see how voters like them. And this is the last thing. There's a whole lot of more information about star voting at this website, which is run by the Equal Vote Coalition.
Jen, can you go back one slide? So the number 3 about unnecessary nonpartisan primary elections, I think Colorado doesn't have nonpartisan primary elections. In Denver, they do have a general election for city council and then runoffs. And I think those are nonpartisan, but so maybe we would, if we were to adopt a similar idea about getting rid of nonpartisan primary elections, we'd probably get rid of the nonpartisan runoff in Colorado instead, because I don't think we have nonpartisan primaries here.
Yeah, no,
Thanks.
I mean, obviously, this is written for Oregon. If we decided we wanted to do something like this in Colorado, we would need to be sure that it was compliant with, whatever other legal requirements there are here. Which is why the league is such a great partner for this, because they're really good at that sort of thing. And I just want to thank Sarah and Sass from the Equal Vote Coalition, because they shared a lot of their materials with me and helped me work on this presentation. And they're really enthusiastic and gung-ho and would love to talk to anyone about STAR anytime. So I appreciate their help. And that's it for me.
I want to say two things. One is that SAS from the Equal Vote Coalition, it has a discussion hour every Tuesday evening, or Tuesday at 5 maybe. It's on the Equal Vote Coalition website calendar. If anybody is interested in going to that, I'm interested. I haven't been. And then a second thing I wanted to say, just a full disclosure, my mother-in-law taught Jameson Quinn High School English.
That's great. I will also say the Equal Vote Coalition has a very active Slack channel that anyone can join to discuss all the various things they do.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the second presentation? And who's going to do the second presentation?
I can go now if you want me to, if my mute is fixed or my
You sound
volume is
great,
fixed.
Jody.
Okay. I just wanted to say something. We didn't let Andrea introduce herself, I don't think, did we? Did I miss that?
Oh, I did get a chance to, but thank you, Jody.
I was like, I just remember me not picking someone, and then I was like, did Andrea talk? Okay. So can we share my screen? Me, the other non-IT person?
Beth, are you taking care of that? You're muted.
Jody can share her screen, yes.
So, sorry, what do I do? I thought that it was your end.
If you look at the bottom, it should say share screen.
Okay. All
So
right.
click that and then
Yeah.
we'll see your screen.
Oh, there we go.
You'll see several
And-
options, one of which includes your wallpaper.
And thanks so much to,
How's that? Except it seems to have turned off my volume again.
we can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay,
We can see your slides.
okay, fantastic. I'm gonna fly through this because I think, as you guys just kind of confirmed a few minutes ago, most people know IRV the best. So this is our most mini presentation here that we've done for different people. So why we, I'm going to go through this first though, why we chose RCV or IRV for Fort Collins was because we wanted to come up with the most appropriate representation in our different districts and for our mayor. And we often have more than 2 people running. And we want that choice. We want more than 2 people to be able to run, but without the spoiler effect. And we get the spoiler effect all the time. And everyone understands that. So we wanted something that had stood up to legal battles. We wanted something that was easy enough to explain. We wanted something that was good for nonpartisan elections, and even went so far as to take some of the power away from the parties and how they play into it, even though we have nonpartisan elections. But so as everyone knows, we have plurality elections, which just means you get one choice and the plurality winner wins, period. We started down this RCV path a long time ago, but then in our last city council election, we did have a district that had 5 people running, 4 people from one party, even though it's nonpartisan again, but 4 people from one platform, 1 person from another platform. The 1 person won with 30% of the vote. So they definitely became a poster child for us as to the main reason why we wanted to change. So basically RCV Oh, here, I'm sorry. This is the current way we vote, plurality voting. So even though only 40% of the people voted for candidate one, they win. It's as simple as that, even though you probably have a classic vote splitting situation right here. So with RCV, here's your ballot. Instead of just voting for one, you rank them. No, you do not have to rank all of them. You can rank or just vote for one. You can rank part of them. You can rank all of them. That seemed to be one of the things our opposition misled people about, was that if they only ranked one person, we were going to throw their ballot out. So they like to kind of mislead you about what an exhausted ballot is. We all get this ballot. We are free to rank all of the available choices. You don't have to love them all or hate them all, but most of us can rank a group of available choices. We don't always love who's running, but they are who they are. So you're allowed to rank them. And if you don't, and your candidate or the only people you ranked do end up getting eliminated, then you have exhausted your own ballot, basically. But so basically, if in this previous, well, before this, actually, if everyone has their first choices counted and someone wins the majority of votes, they win and it's over. And yay, you just get to be more comfortable and not mad because you see that someone won by 75% and there's just not all that unrest that there is when you have something like this next slide. If no one wins by 50%, like in the previous example here, you basically go to instant runoffs. And what that means is that the least vote getting candidate is eliminated and their votes or their votes instantly transfer to their next choice. Basically, this is exactly like a runoff, but it's just happening right now. So now that candidate 3 is eliminated, what we want to know is those people that voted for candidate 3, who do they want in this new round, this new election where candidate 3 does not exist? And the way we find out who they want, who their available choices are now, we look at their second choices and that's how you find out. So it just shows this candidate's votes instantly transferring to the other candidates. And in this, we actually changed this slide because it shows candidate number 2 going on to win, and opposition likes to say, well, that's icky, that doesn't seem right. I think it's under, well, about 5% of the time that will happen. 95% of the time candidate 1 or the majority winner in the first round will go on to win. But in 5% or so cases, candidate 2 will win. And it's because you had a classic vote splitting situation here. And these voters have combined back into backing the person that they really like more as a group. So that is what I just said. Do you have any questions about just the process so far? I have a couple more things, but I know I kind of babbled through that pretty quick. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes, I do see a hand. I don't see many people though, so if you guys could help me out and send me questions, that would be.
Jody, I don't know if you want to get into these weeds yet, but doesn't Alaska have some sort of a ranked choice vote, but they're still having a runoff?
Yeah, Alaska has basically an open primary. So their primary, anyone runs in it, and then the top 4 winners of that primary go on to the general, and they use ranked choice voting in the general.
Ah,
Yeah, it's a choose one primary with instant runoff voting for the top 4, sometimes called Final 4 RCV or Final 4 IRV. I had a question. You talked about the opposition. Was there an actual issue committee that? Okay, yeah. I didn't know that about that.
Yeah, we had, so Fort Collins did get instant runoff on the 2011 ballot. So 11 years ago, it actually went onto our ballot as a citizens initiative, getting signatures, and it lost back then 60-40 with you know, that was a lot different environment when people didn't really know what it was. And back then it was our Chamber of Commerce. Our Chamber of Commerce truly here, and I don't know if every place is like this, but the Chamber of Commerce here is really very, very much a kind of an arm of our county Republican Party, really. So the same thing happened, that we got another committee against us, and it was people from the chamber. But it's just unfortunate because for us, it's like we are so tired of people getting so just incensed about like losing elections that they shouldn't lose, right? I just think that if you have a super red district, they should have conservative representation. If you have a blue district, they should have blue representation. So this shouldn't be nonpartisan. It's a way for people to actually get a majority representative. But so honestly, in Fort Collins, they probably should have just said it's going to be harder for, I mean, and this is true across the board. It's harder for fringy candidates to win, or it's harder for one issue candidates to win, as it should be. So, you know, a moderate Republican could do fine in Fort Collins, just like a moderate Democrat could do fine in Fort Collins. And that's really who should be winning. But so they probably should have just said it's going to be hard for fringy Republicans to win, which it would have been. It would be hard for a fringy Democrat to win, as it should be, in our opinion.
So in 2011, another factor may have been the recent poor implementation of ranked voting in Aspen, and it got implemented and then overturned. And I don't even want to call it RCV because it wasn't a very good version. They had to jerry rig it during the tabulation because they hadn't thought ahead. So this is just a reason for us to make sure anything we propose has been well vetted.
Yeah, absolutely. When the last 5.5 years that I've been kicking RCV down the road here, I did listen to a presentation once from one of the guys who actually counted in Aspen, and he said they basically just screwed it up. It was messy, and that just makes people, you know, fearful.
So one of the things that happened, just to let everybody know, is that they didn't think ahead that there was a multi-winner contest, and they didn't tabulate it correctly. And then the people who lost, of course, were very unhappy and felt like it wasn't fair. And so there was a big campaign to overturn it.
And then that's another thing. People will like to talk about it getting repealed. And typically when it gets repealed, like one of the first places it was used was a city council in, I think, Alhambra, Ohio in like 1915. And it got repealed really quickly because it elected a civil rights activist, which there's a lot of political repeals. So it's like for sometimes political reasons.
Jody, I think that was Ashtabula.
Ashtabula, thank you.
Yes, and it was the proportional RCV version. And after Ashtabula adopted the proportional kind called single transferable vote, Boulder was the second city in the United States to adopt it. And we had it for 30 years, and there were several efforts to repeal it. And finally, they succeeded in 1947. And there's a whole paper I can share with people if you want to see about it, but we should probably move on. I think the campaign idea stuff is important because it's part of how these things are adopted. So I think it is important to talk about it, but we probably should let Felix have some chance to talk pretty soon.
Thank you.
Do you want to finish your slides, or do you have anything else left to say, Jody? Or
no, well, no. The rest of our slides are pretty much just different places it's used, and if anybody has any questions later about history, or that's pretty much all I had. I already said it holds up to legal challenges. It has a long history.
okay,
So,
great.
I can take questions later if anybody has any.
Okay. You can stop sharing your screen then.
Yes, I gotta get to the other screen to do it. Everything's piled on top of each other now.
And I can't turn on my video again for some reason. It says you can't start your video because your host stopped it. So someone could turn that on for me. I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I don't have my bottom access to the bottom toolbar anymore.
You might see a little bar up the top. It's got a little green highlight on it. We technically can't see it. So
There you go.
perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, if someone could help me get my video back on. Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. I have the permission, I have the power. So yeah, Celeste, you don't, should I just go ahead?
Please.
Okay, all right. I will get my presentation good. Well, I don't have permissions for screen sharing, it seems.
Let me see if I can do something about that.
Got it.
I think we do now.
Great, perfect.
I didn't do
Okay.
anything. I just saw that it got changed.
Okay, here, let's close my tabs to my right. So hi everyone, my name is Felix Sargent. I'm the chair of the board at the Center for Election Science, as Neil so graciously introduced me. My degree is in economics, and I'm a head of software engineering. Please don't hold that against me. I live in San Francisco, and I've lived in Oakland and New York before that. So very, very familiar with ranked choice voting, and actually was a really big advocate for a long time before I joined the Center for Election Science. Just want to call that out there. So Center for Election Science was started in 2011. So we haven't been around that long, especially not compared to Fair Vote, but we're a national nonprofit focused on voting reform, with our mission being focused on empowering people on voting methods to strengthen democracy. And our vision is a world where democracies thrive because voters' voices are heard. And I think one of the important things about our mission and vision is that we're not necessarily centered around one voting method in particular. We really like to look at all voting methods, compare them all, and really look at the science, the game theory, the mathematics, as well as the history and the ease of implementation in order for us to decide which one we want to recommend in any scenario where people come to us and say, hey, what voting method should we use in this scenario? So the main one that we advocate for is approval voting. So, we studied a lot of them, but ultimately we got to a point where we're like, okay, this is the simplest and easiest method to implement. Let's go for it. Let's start advocating for it. Approval voting really couldn't be simpler. You take an existing ballot, and rather than just saying choose one, you can vote for all the candidates that you want, and the candidate with the most votes wins. So the best thing about it is its simplicity. It works with existing voting machines, which means it takes almost no time to implement and doesn't cost anything at all either, because most voting machines are already compatible with approval voting, such as if you're doing a city council, there are 3 seats open, pick 3. All we make it is there are 9 candidates, pick 9 if you want to, up to 9. It's always safe to vote for your honest favorite under approval voting, so you'll never ever hurt you never need to not support somebody because you've run out of votes. It prevents vote splitting, which means that you don't have the Bush, Gore, Nader style situation where because someone else ran, they took votes from another candidate that leads to the people voting for their lesser evil and voting strategically in that way, or voting for a candidate that they truly prefer, but end up making sure that the worst candidate for them wins. It's significantly more fair and more accurate than choose one voting, which means that you get the result that you're looking for. And also, because you're able to vote for as many candidates as you like, there's no way to void, mess up, or spoil your ballot. You just put in the markings as you want it, as opposed to your vote getting thrown away because you put in too many markings. And the other great thing is approval voting is highly compatible with existing state and municipal election codes. So for example, In Missouri, they have a requirement that you need to have a majority. Great, you do an approval voting primary and you have a majority runoff. In situations where you don't need to have that, you can use approval voting without any kind of primary. You can just make sure that you have the top winner. Both scenarios are available, and it means that we can basically be implemented anywhere as soon as the law passes. So that talks a lot about the usage of approval voting, but what are the actual effects of approval voting? So approval voting has a tendency to elect the candidates that most people can agree on. It elects consensus candidates. The reasons why the United States is so polarized right now is because when you can only choose one, there ends up just being two camps, because the parties exist to eliminate choices so that there aren't those kind of spoiler candidates running. When it's a two-person election, then there's no way of splitting the vote there. When you can just pick as many candidates as you like, that means as many candidates as want to run can run, which means more people get more choice, and the candidate who wins tends to be very high quality and has a huge amount of support across the population and tends to be right in the middle, but able to offer nuanced solutions to complex policies. Approval voting also provides really easy and clear to understand results. As you know, I don't want to rag on ranked choice voting here, but as someone who lives in San Francisco, it can take a very long time for us to receive results. And also it can be sometimes very difficult to understand why we got the results that we got. The more candidates that run in a race, the more runoffs that happen, the more rounds that occur, and the harder it is to really understand exactly how we got that solution. And as I said before, the implementation of approval voting, because it's so simple, because it works with existing voting machines, is really fast and very easy. One of the critiques that we often get at approval voting is, well, what happens if you just, if everyone just votes for only one candidate? Isn't that the same as plurality? So here's an example. You like candidate A, you love candidate A, you like candidate B, but you hate candidate T. Let's just throw that in there. If you approve, do you want to approve for A and B or just your favorite? And the result there really depends on polling. If T is competitive with A and B, then you might want to say, like, look, I want anyone but T. I'll pick both A and B. If T is not really part of the picture, nobody's voting for T, but A and B are really close in the polls, you might say, well, you know what? I'm going to just vote for A because they are my true favorite in that candidate. But here's why it's different from choose one voting. You're always voting for your favorite. You're never picking the lesser evil in this scenario. You're never saying, like, well, B's more electable, so I'll vote for them, right? If the question is, I really don't want T to win, but you really love A, you can vote for A and B, or just A, but you're always voting for your favorite. In the worst case scenario, let's say everyone plays this game where like A voters say, like, well, I'm just going to vote for B. A voters say, I'm just going to vote for A, and B voters go, I'm just going to vote for B, and T voters say, I'm just going to vote for T. Everyone still voted honestly in that scenario. And that means that A and B might tie if there is, an equal level of support in those communities. And, under that scenario, A and B are very similar, right? You like A, and you love A, you like B, and if it ties, then you're not really losing too much in that scenario, as opposed to the plurality choose one scenario where the worst candidate for you ends up winning. I also want to take a step back and actually talk a little bit about the voting theory here and talk about ranking versus scoring to help you understand a little bit about how various different voting methods work. So a rank is a score. It's just a score with rules saying that it needs to be exclusive. You can't give two people first place, right? And it's linear. You can't vote your first place and then your third place. You have to vote, it has to go 1, 2, 3. An approval is a 0 to 1 score, like was said in the star voting presentation. But the interesting thing is, summing ranks is hard. If I like, A first, B second, C third, and you like C first, B second, and A third, how do we add that up, right? How do we actually come to a consensus in that scenario? Ranked choice voting is one method, but as we talked about with Aspen, there are lots of different methods, and there are some ways to actually method up. Whereas when you're dealing with just the numbers of approval, or a 0 or 1 or a 1 to 5, like in STAR, it's really, really easy for you to be able to sum that information together. So theory aside, let's talk about the actual practical implementation. In Fargo, North Dakota in 2018, Tony Gehrig won the Fargo Commissioner race with 22% support. And the City Commission created an election task force, and that was chaired by Jed Limke. Jed reached out to the Center for Election Science and did his research, and they ended up recommending to the City Council that they should switch to approval voting. And then the City Commission refused to act, mainly because Tony Gehrig was on it. So Jed refused to give up. He actually created a campaign to get approval voting on the ballot, and then built a community effort to actually get it passed. There was huge amounts of turnout with Fargo, and it ended up winning with 64% of the vote. And when they had the election, they made this little PSA. I hope you can hear it.
Felix, we cannot.
Okay, thank you so much for telling me that. Let me figure out share sign, optimize for video clips. Share.
There you go. There you go.
Could you put it in the link?
I will. Let me try that one more
The
time
June
though.
election is going.
Did you hear that?
The June election is going to be just a little
We
bit
hear it,
different
we hear
this
it.
year.
You can vote for 1 or 2.
Or as many of us.
As you like.
It's that simple.
I couldn't help but include that simply because I love, how it reveals the simplicity. The voter education component of approval voting is bar none. When the actual election happened, using approval. Oh, hi, Eloise. Sorry, this is my daughter. Hi. Then Arlette Preston ended up winning with 53%, and John Strand ended up winning with 55%. And the important thing to note here is that it's not the share of votes that you get. It is, what is your approval amongst all the people that voted? And that means that out of the 18,805 Fargo voters, like 55% of those voters, you can say, 55% of those voters actually ended up supporting that candidate. And so it's really easy for you to know, like, do I actually have majority support?
Hey, Felix, your 10 minutes are up, so if you could
Oh no.
go a little
I will speed up
faster.
really quickly. So slide extrusion, another situation. Okay, thanks. Look at the airplane. I have an airplane on my screen. Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't expecting her to be noisy. So we had a lot of support. The League of Women Voters proudly endorsed the election in St. Louis, and it ended up passing with 68% of the vote, an absolute landslide. When we actually did the race in St. Louis, Tashara Jones won with 57% and 64% there. And this is also exactly how it was presented in the election results, final unofficial results by approval percentage. So again, it doesn't need to sum to 100% under approval voting. Here are some great resources that I really encourage people to look at. I will be sharing these slides afterwards. Guide to a Better Ballot is a really great interactive explainer, and I'll let you go over these yourselves afterwards. Any questions?
Felix, when you talked about A, B, and T,
Yeah.
the best idea for the voter was to look at the polls, but polls are getting less and less and less predictive.
Yeah, I think the scenario there is that, like, it's up to the voter to decide where they want to draw the line. and they're not making a mistake by, going kind of further to the middle when they're picking, which candidates they want to support. I mean, ultimately, if you don't like a candidate, don't approve of them. But the reason that bullet voting is so often lobbed against approval voting is that people make it think that it's going to be choose one plurality, where you're voting for the lesser evil. And so, you can choose to vote for those lesser evil candidates if you want, but your rating for all of your candidates is independent. So you're never going to necessarily hurt your favorite by approving of any other candidates. And because your votes are all considered at the same time, as opposed to ranked choice voting, where your second, your third, and your fourth choice votes aren't considered. And so there are a number of scenarios that have occurred under ranked choice voting where a second place candidate gets majority support but doesn't actually end up winning that election. And that actually happened most recently in Alaska with Nick Begich, where you have a majority conservative state ending up electing a Democratic representative. You think that's a bit odd.
So Felix and Jen, if you would please share your slides with Beth Hendricks. Beth, would you put your email into the chat? And I'm going to go ahead and go back to sharing my screen. We thank you so much for those very informative talks. I don't know if we'll want to do more on single winner voting methods or not. Here's a slide on what I thought I would talk about, but I figured we wouldn't have time if we limited this to about an hour, but just a bunch of topics you can look at. And if you can think of others that we might want to discuss, I think, for instance, we might need to discuss the campaign environment on here. Neil, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to say something, Neil? Okay, I'm going to move on then.
Neil,
so
you're on mute.
Neil is saying that he can't unmute himself.
Oh,
Did somebody unmute?
Somebody needs to unmute him.
We need to unmute all.
Thank you.
Everyone's
I think that
unmuted.
worked. And actually, my point was also to re-enable the chat. Some people can chat, some people can't chat. And when the chat is disabled, we can't even save the chat. So I think we need to come up with a different solution there.
Chat is enabled for all.
Thank you, Beth. Anything
Still
else?
says disabled
wanted-
for me, but we'll hope it addresses it. Thanks.
You can send a test chat if you'd like. So I feel like trying to keep the meeting to a shorter amount of time is probably what most people want. Thinking about the next meeting, we may want to consider discussion of single winner methods. Maybe people have specific questions they would like to ask the proponents of the different methods. That's certainly a great thing for us to do because we want to understand these methods. Two other things we might want to talk about. One is multi-winner voting methods, in particular proportional multi-winner voting methods. So Desmond, can you tell us a little bit about what RCV is planning for, RCV for Colorado is planning for the presidential primaries? Is it the 15% proportional allocation RCV? The same method used in Kansas and some other states?
I think Desmond is saying he can't unmute himself either.
Can you unmute him?
I will try. Everyone should have the ability to unmute.
It looks like we have to
Okay.
say. ask to
There I
unmute.
am. I can talk. Yay. Yeah, so we're looking at sponsoring a bill, and we do want to enable the different political parties and their options to choose how they divvy up their delegates. So it might be a winner take all, it might be a proportionate representation. I know, like the Colorado Green Party, they divvy theirs up in a proportionate, and they use a ranked choice voting method, and that's been a part of the Green Party platform since the late 90s.
I thought that the national parties decided if it was winner take all or if it was proportional. So for instance, Colorado last time sent delegates for a couple different
Oh, no, yeah.
Democratic candidates, but
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Republicans only did Trump because it was a
Well,
Trump year.
The Republicans didn't have a primary in 2016, actually. They
Yeah.
kind of held
Yeah.
theirs behind.
But isn't it the
yeah.
case that the Republican Party does winner take all primaries in general? It's not just because of Trump.
I
Yeah,
think that
yeah,
helped Trump win, actually.
yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, we need to worry about, we need to be flexible, whatever we do, because the national parties have some say. So
But
that's something to consider. Do you,
our
Desmond, do
goal
you-
is to give the autonomy to the state parties to pick, like, how they divvy up their
Desmond, do you think
delegates.
that the League of Women Voters could be involved in working on the bill before it's introduced?
Yeah.
Or do you need to run that by the board of RCV?
We have a policy stakeholder meeting every month, and we bring everyone to the table from Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and affiliated, Libertarians, Greens, the whoever's welcome to the conversation, and we try to make sure this is fair and inclusive to everybody.
Desmond, some of us have tried to go to that meeting and not been allowed in.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can be in charge of letting people in instead of whoever is in charge, but I
Okay.
think the league would like to be involved with that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, the meeting's usually the first Thursday of every month.
And how can we get invited to attend that?
I'll put my email in the chat. In the chat.
Great, thanks so much.
Yeah,
That would be wonderful.
yeah.
It's
Wait.
the afternoon of the first Thursday of the month, like 1 p.m. or something.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great.
Chat's still disabled, so
I'm sorry, it's telling me it's enabled, but
it's D Wellington at rcvforcolorado.org.
Thank you so much, Desmond. Okay,
Celeste, Neil texted my phone to say that he cannot chat and cannot unmute.
can we unmute everybody?
Great, thank you. Yeah, just really to say that chat is still disabled, it looks like for several of us.
Okay, so how do people feel about discussing, are we ready to discuss multi-winner voting methods next time? And I talked a little bit about election structure, campaigns with RCV for Colorado, for Fort Collins. Presidential primaries have their own quirks. So there's a lot of election structure that has to be considered. It's not the voting methods, but it affects all the voting methods. So maybe I'll work a little bit more on that for next time. what do people think in terms of the agenda for next time? Especially people who haven't said anything yet. Some of the quiet people or first timers like Neil.
Can
Bergs-
you say anything?
Yeah, Neil, can you say anything?
I apparently I
Looks
have
like there-
gotten unmuted and chatted again. Thank you. But I don't want to
I'm-
mute it because I'm afraid it'll go away.
And Gaithia said she can neither chat nor talk.
Try now.
Okay,
Okay.
Sorry, folks. Neil, Gaithia, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say chat is working for me now. Apparently, maybe not
Yeah,
for
this
everybody.
Neil Bergstrom, we haven't heard from, and or Brenda hasn't said anything this meeting. Cynthia, is there anything? What do you think of what we propose for the next meeting? It's probably too much, but
Well, I'll just jump in. You know, I'm just trying to gather information and get myself educated. So it's a bit of, you know, drinking from the fire hose right now. But it looks like there are a lot of things to be considered front end and back end. And you know, I'm just interested in learning more.
so one of the things we talked about last time was focusing on statewide candidates, and also state legislative candidates, maybe trying to do some proportional representation bill for statewide candidates, for state legislative candidates. It's late, sorry. Neil Bergstrom, did you want to say anything else? Or-
Well, I think that any sort of ranked choice voting would be a step in the right direction. What really needs to be done is go to multi-candidate districts, that to do away with the idea of partisan gerrymandering, to let people basically choose their own, so I don't see any reason why Colorado shouldn't have 8 at-large members in the House of Representatives.
If we were to join the Fair Representation Act, then US Fair Representation Act, if that were to be implemented, then, and the webinar tomorrow is about that, so I'm going to put that in the chat again. Then we would have one district with 5 members and one district with 3 members, and you can learn more about it at this webinar at 8 a.m. Colorado time tomorrow. It's going to be on the East Coast, so I hope some of you sign up for that. I plan to sign up for it.
So one comment about that. We in Colorado don't have the power to change that for the US House of Representatives, because that's, congressional law that those are single member districts, but we could change it for the Colorado State Legislature. States have the power to do that. So we could, for instance, instead of having 35 single member districts for the state Senate, we could have 7 5-member districts and a PR voting method. So that, that's something that's within the power of the state to decide.
And
Well, and
the
then
other
you
thing
have-
you can do is work to get your congressman to support, to become a co-sponsor of the US Fair Representation Act. So I worked really hard to get Joe Neguse to be a co-sponsor. So I'd love to see every member of Congress from Colorado be a co-sponsor of the US Fair Representation Act.
Hey Celeste, I can't attend in the morning. Can you put a link or something out if they have it recorded for later viewing?
Sure will. I sure will, especially since it sounds like we might be talking about that for our next meeting. We haven't really decided what we're going to talk about for our next meeting.
I would like to hear more on proportional.
Okay, I'm going back to this. So maybe the main topic would be proportional multi-winner voting methods. Maybe Desmond would be willing to do a presentation on the presidential primary. Bill?
Sure can.
So,
That
so
would
I have
be
a
wonderful.
I was
question
muted.
for the people who are, you know, the drinking from a fire hose. The talking about the details of this method gets very wonky and very mathy very fast. Would it be useful to have sort of a higher level thing first on just what's the idea of proportional representation? Why does it need multi-member districts? Why would it help overcome gerrymandering and those sorts of things?
So
I
Yes.
don't think she's recommending
Oh,
you do
okay.
that, Desmond.
Yeah.
She's done that.
okay.
I would be happy to do a presentation like that.
Okay, so we could have two presentations, and it, you know, for the one that Desmond would do, it's not really multi-member election. It's a presidential primary where you're electing delegates, but and it's proportional in an interesting sort of way. So anyway, we could talk about that. Anyway, yeah, okay. So I think we have some ideas. We're going to have Desmond and Jen talk about those two things, high level PR, proportional representation, and then the bill that RCV for Colorado is working on. Great. Yay. Okay, let's look at the next thing, which is we have to pick a date. So we need to pick a date that both Jen and Desmond can make, and a time. I just picked 6:30 to 8 because that's kind of what we've been doing. I looked at the League of Women Voters of Colorado calendar and picked dates that were free because Beth and Hannah are supporting us on this, and they have a life too. I could send
Not
out a
really.
Google poll, but I prefer to like get some comments now from people.
Any of that is okay with me, but Tuesday is my least favorite because I have another thing I would have to skip to do Tuesday.
How about you, Desmond?
Yeah, the Wednesday or Monday works well for me.
Okay. Should we say Monday, since that's sort of our regular scheduled slot and everybody was able to, who's here now, was able to make it? I see Katie just joined us. Welcome, Katie. So we'll plan on December.
Hi,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry I didn't put my video on. It won't let me. So, but thank you. Hello.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and, oh, I guess I can go to our next slide, which isn't all that interesting. Thanks for being part of the task force. Let's go back and see everybody's faces. And we might be able to get your face on here. There's some interesting technology stuff. So